How's it going, guys? So, my name is George Daniels, and I'm just now starting my personal training career. I'm 20 years old. I'm currently attending University of North Carolina at Charlotte. And in this video, I just wanted to talk about pretty much just macronutrients as they relate to our health and our fitness goals. So, first and foremost, there's three macronutrients. There is fat, carbs, and protein. So each one has a different calorie expenditure. So fat has the highest, as most people know, at 9 grams per, or I'm sorry, yes, at 9 calories per gram, sorry. And then carbs is also 4 per gram, and then protein is 4 as well. So protein and carbs are equal, but fat has the most calories per gram. So for this reason, there's like a craze that many people will say fat is bad, but each one has its own purpose in our health. So first, I want to talk about macronutrients as they relate to weight loss. So first and foremost, I would like to say that protein is like extremely essential. When it comes to weight loss, protein is really, really important. Mainly because if you're trying to lose weight, it's important that you keep protein in your diet, because if you don't, then your muscle mass will suffer as a result. But if you have a really low amount of muscle mass, then your metabolic rate will drop. And what is your metabolic rate? Essentially, it's the rate that metabolism it can occur in a living organism. So in us, metabolism, when our metabolism drops, that's extremely bad. So we want to keep our metabolism as high as possible, meaning we have to have adequate protein, especially when we're losing weight. So then we have to make sure, right? So then what's a good estimate of how many, carbs, how much protein, and how much fat I should be consuming, right? That's a good question. So it kind of depends, but first I would say you need to figure out how much calories you need a day to maintain your current weight. And there's a lot of apps you can use to do that. I think MyFitnessPal or MyPlate, those are good apps you can use for iOS and Android to calculate that. And once you do that, then you take that amount of calories, and if you're trying to lose weight, I'd suggest initially you go for just a simple caloric deficit diet, meaning that you take that amount of calories that this app is going to tell you based on your activity level, your age, your height, and things like that, is going to tell you how many calories you need to maintain your weight. Then you're going to take that amount and roughly subtract about 300 calories, right, from that amount. And by doing so, each week you should be able to track if you're losing at least a pound or two a week. And initially, that should work very well if you're having a good workout plan. So then what should I also consider about like what macronutrients I should eat? So as a rough estimate, you should intake roughly when you're trying to lose weight, roughly 20% of your calories should come from carbohydrates, roughly 40% should come from protein, and then the other 40% should come from fat. Now, this is not extremely high protein, but it is still relatively high protein. So many people, though, may have like this preconceived idea that protein is kind of like a man food, and many people may actually stop eating like meat and things like that, which I'm not advocating you have to eat meat to get protein, but meat is a very good source of protein that should, in some cases, if you're not like a vegan or a vegetarian, should be used to help you to make sure you're keeping up with your macronutrient intake. So then how do we do this, right? Because if you think about most snacks are highly processed and they don't generally contain much protein. I'd say probably the most popular ingredient in most snacks is probably wheat flour, which is pretty much essentially in terms of macronutrients, it's just carbs, right? So then where are we going to get the protein from? Because in a lot of cases in our lives, we don't have time to sit down for many meals. Maybe dinner is like the only meal we have time to sit down for, meaning that we need to have a convenient way that we can have protein in our diet. So how are we going to do that? You guessed it. So we're going to actually supplement our diet, right? In some cases that's necessary if we need to reach our protein goals, right? This is why they're called supplements, because they simply supplement our intake with regular food. So in the link below, I'm going to leave a link to one of the pretty cool websites I like to use to buy protein rich snacks and things like that. And then another thing, if you're trying to lose weight, try to make sure your carbohydrates are complex carbohydrates, and primarily complex as opposed to simple. What I mean by that, I mean that try to make sure your carbs are coming from things like brown rice, oatmeal, maybe wheat bread, wheat bagels, anything that has whole grains. You can check the fiber content on the back, and if it's more than like maybe 3 grams per serving, then that's really good. Beans, and like whole grain cereal and things like that. So that way you'll stay fuller longer. And also there's a study about that I wanted to put below as well. So yeah, so that's pretty much the meat and potatoes of it. Right, so now I'll also talk about number 2 is how should macronutrients be utilized when we're trying to build muscle. So for weight loss, protein is the most important macronutrient. Never forget it. But when bulking or trying to like put on a lot of muscle, also weight, then the most important is actually it's carbohydrates. So roughly from after you calculate based on your goal, your maintenance goal of calories, then you're gonna, instead of subtracting 300, you're gonna add 300. So so 300 from, let's say my maintenance calories is maybe 2,500, then it would be 2,800. Now from that 2,800 calories, then roughly roughly 50% of that should be carbs, which is a lot higher than when you're trying to lose weight. Roughly 25% protein and roughly 25% fat, right? So I won't elaborate on that too much, but keep in mind that when bulking, carbs are the best way to kind of put on weight more quickly, which is the exact opposite of what we're trying to do when we're losing weight. So definitely try to follow that. And then for cutting is more so about, so say you're like a bodybuilder, men's physique competitor or something like that. Shout out, I want to be a men's physique competitor. So then let's say that you've achieved a decent amount of muscle mass, right? And you're like, okay, but I still have like maybe a high body fat percentage, and I want to drop down so I can be more aesthetically appealing for my contest. So you want to make sure that you're holding on to protein, right? So in the same way, you're going to be losing weight, right? You're going to be losing weight. So just like the first macro plan, you're going to also want to make sure your protein is relatively high. So I would suggest roughly 1.5 pounds, 1.5 gram, 1.5 grams per pound of your body weight. So for example, I weigh about 195 pounds. So I would take that, multiply it by 1.5, and that's about how much protein I should intake, which is outrageous. So especially if you're trying to cut, then you definitely need to supplement your diet with protein, because it's virtually impossible for you to intake that much protein. So, excuse me. So then, and then maybe roughly 20% of your calories should be healthy fats, and then the other percentage, whatever that may be, that's left is carbs. Carbs are least important when you're trying to cut. So that's pretty much it. And so one thing I also wanted to get back to, so more about the weight loss. So I know that's kind of out of order, but more about the weight loss. So in the beginning, you want to make sure you're utilizing caloric deficit, but as you go along, you may realize that, oh shoot, I'm not losing like at least like roughly 2 pounds a week. Like, what do I do now? Then sometimes you should use different kind of plans, right? So one plan that's very many people know about it is ketogenic diet, which I'll put a link below about it. But ketogenic diet is essentially just pretty much a higher fat intake diet, and also protein. Protein is moderate, fat is high, and carbs is extremely low. And what happens is actually your body starts to use fat as the primary source of energy, which is not the way that we naturally run. We naturally run off of carbs as energy, but instead fat is being used. So you'll see in the description that this is very successful for these randomly selected participants in this study, right? They all had like very positive effects on their health and whatnot, and their weight loss. You just have to keep in mind there's something that they call ketogenic diet cancer, and it's not actually cancer, but in the beginning of your body adapting to using fat as energy as opposed to carbs, then it can kind of feel like you're kind of almost having like carbohydrate withdrawals, which is kind of crazy, but that's pretty much what happens. So then, so basically, that's pretty much everything. I just wanted to say, initially when you're trying to lose weight, it's a pretty good idea that you just use, the regular 300 below your maintenance calories, lose roughly 2 pounds a week kind of deal. I think that's optimal in the beginning. But eventually your body adapts to whatever kind of stimulus that you're using. So in that way, I would say you should use the ketogenic diet or some other form of diet that is going to help you lose weight after you've kind of plateaued in your weight loss, right? But I wouldn't suggest you use it in the beginning. And why wouldn't I? Well, if you think about like, Dragon Ball Z or something, if you think about Dragon Ball Z, for example, in the beginning, like let's say that Goku, right, he's gonna fight someone. He doesn't go Super Saiyan until he has to go Super Saiyan, right? What do I mean by that? Well, he's gonna be fighting, but he's not gonna go Super Saiyan unless he needs. In the same way, ketogenic dieting is kind of like the Super Saiyan of diets. You don't need to do it unless you have to do it. Like the caloric deficit diet is sufficient until your body says that, all right, I need something else, right? So when that happens, then I'd say go for that ketogenic diet. Go for maybe even the Atkins diet or something, some other route. Anything, like research other diets that people use besides just a simple caloric deficit, and then definitely apply that. Just make sure that no matter what diet you pick, you have at least an adequate amount of protein. At least 30% of your diet should be protein, no matter what diet you pick, to maintain your muscle mass, which is going to help you keep your metabolic rate high, and is going to make you help you keep burning fat no matter what.